By the way, it was really cool, Jay Gruden yesterday, breaking down the NFL, and it was really cool listening to Jay yesterday talk about, the evolution of the quarterback. The next guy that we're getting on here, I got to tell you something, the quarterbacks that he has worked with, and I brought this up to you before. Look at his resume. And you know what it reminds me of? This resume reminds me a lot of my friend Frank Reich. Frank was my roommate, was my teammate when I was at Maryland my freshman year. And he was there with Boomer Esiason, and then I transferred, obviously, to the University of Miami. Listen to Marc Trestman here. Of course, he won a national championship coaching Bernie Kosar. And Bernie would go on to the Cleveland Browns, and he would also be the offensive coordinator there in Cleveland with Bernie. So you had a Miami guy and a Miami guy working there in Cleveland. He was the offensive coordinator there. He worked in Minnesota. He played, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he was there with the Vikings as a player himself, was quarterback when he was in college, went to school with Tony Dungy. By the way, I can't wait to tell him. Tony Dungy's going to tell me to tell him to say hi because he was a year behind him, I think. He was the OC in San Francisco. I believe that 95 year, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's Steve Young when he was the OC there in San Francisco. Quarterback coach in Detroit, Arizona, he was the OC. Raiders, he was the OC. He was an assistant, I believe, in 04. That, I think, is Dave Wannstedt, the former Miami Hurricane head defensive coordinator in D.C. and Dallas. What did Marc Trestman say? Or, excuse me, what did Frank Reich say when he was on the program a couple of years ago? It's the life of a gypsy when you're assistant. And now he's an assistant coach with the Chargers. He is my friend over 40 years now. He was with me in Tampa, believe it or not, is Marc Trestman, the former head coach of the Chicago Bears. Joins us now here on the program. How you doing, Coach?
I'm not worthy. You've got all these decorated guests, and then you've got me. I just it's a good filler, but you've had some great guests, and it's a privilege and an honor. So happy for you, Dan, and the world you live on and the things you've accomplished. Just proud to be here with you today.
Proud to be your friend too, Marc. I think, Marc, we talked before with Frank Reich. He goes, when you get a head coaching job, man, it's the life of a gypsy. When you go from building to building to building to building, I mean, your resume is littered with really great stops. I mean, have you enjoyed the journey that you went on from all the way back with Howard Schnellenberger to all the way where you are now? You're an assistant there with Jim Harbaugh there in Los Angeles with the Chargers. Have you enjoyed the journey?
Let me digress on Frank Reich for 1 second. I had the privilege of coaching Frank as well in Detroit, and that's how we got to be friends. And one of my greatest memories as an assistant coach when I was working for Bobby Ross, we went to the playoffs that year with Scott Mitchell and Frank as our backup, is on Christmas morning that Scott and Frank showed up at my front door to give me a gift, a Christmas gift. And it's one of my great memories as a coach. And that's what life is. That's what the journey is. It's a bunch of memories. They weren't always good. You got to have resilience to do the job. Frank will tell you that over the last 5 years, what he's been through. But it's you got to go back to your why. Why do I do it? Because I love to touch the lives of the men and women that I've worked with. I'm proud of that. I've used the science of football, which helps them master their craft. But the true reason I've done it is because I like to grow the people that are around me and be a servant leader for them. So no regrets. Would I've done it differently? That's a regret. So I can't say that. I've made the most every place I've been. I've enjoyed my time in Canada probably as much as I enjoyed any time, because it's all the same. You got players that love ball, are credit card thin, different as athletes than the players in the NFL. But, changing and touching the lives of people on the field, off the people, support staff. It's been a life well lived, and I'm grateful to have landed in LA with Jim Harbaugh, who was my quarterback coach in Oakland, and with two coaches on the staff that are coordinators that I gave their first job to, and Mike Devlin, our line coach, who I coach in Arizona. So it's come full circle, and it's been a privilege to work for Jim and be in the quarterback room every day with Justin.
Coach, tell me how the game has evolved, because the Eagles in other places have analytics that are so much more part of the game than when you first came into the game. And I mean, the game has changed so much on how important that is. And just to reference Frank again, I mean, a lot of the game plans today are built off those analytics that the coaches take, because back in the day, you would have to break film down, or you'd have a quality control guy. He would break down 3rd and 10. He'd break down 3rd and 10 minus 20. And all of a sudden you would have all this tape on the guys. And now you have an analytics department that kind of does that for you. How much is that part of the game today, not just in Philly, but across the board now, that is a major part of the game?
Well, I can't speak for anywhere else, but I mean, there's two sides to this. There's still coaches who break the games down because the analytics people don't understand football. They can read the data, but they don't understand football. They wouldn't know cover 3 from cover 9 mostly. So, because they're in a separate room, doing things that giving us data, but it's not the data that we use to break a team down. There can be so much data today that it's hard to do a game plan because you get caught up in the minutia. I've always simplified it. These are the game wreckers. We got to neutralize them. These are the protection issues. We got to take care of that first, because if the quarterback can't complete a throwing motion, we don't complete a pass. Who are their best run defenders? It's really analyzing who the players are, and we can use the productivity from PFF and others sources to get that. But the bottom line is, you watch the tape and you know where the problems are, and then you know what the coverages are, and then you know the concepts you have that fit the coverages and have answers for the other coverages that they play beside. And the bottom line is, in the National Football League, there's no tendencies anymore. I mean, we call it, back in the day, we call it a Rolodex. So I put on a PowerPoint now because no player knows what a Rolodex is, but they get the point of, they just throw a dart at a board and that's the coverage, or that's the blitz. So I've tried to, in my mind, simplify the game. And so the analytics comes in, so we're going for it on 4th down. If it's 4th and 4, if it's 4th and 3, we hear that in our headsets with our game management analytics people, but it's still up to the head coach to decide, what, they might say go for it, but you know what, the wind, how our defense is playing, who the quarterback is, that's all got it. And I've been up front as a head coach in those meetings, and I've sat as a coordinator in those meetings, and they're very difficult because really nobody knows what it's like until they stepped in the shoes of the head coach that's got to decipher all that information. And that's where analytics is used more than anything. Do we defer? Do we take the ball? All those other things, that's part of the analytical process.
Coach, when I see a good coordinator, to me, tell me if this is still part of it. I mean, obviously we're based in Philly, but I watch a lot of ball all around, and as you know, as you do as well, and you're in it still. How much of it is a feel of the game? Boy, I'm watching Vic Fangio right now with the Eagles, and the way that he has just a feel on bringing pressure, not bringing pressure, post-snap coverages and sliding to the coverage that you're looking for, putting 2 high safeties in the game now. I mean, the way that these guys call games today, is it still the feel of the game, Coach, that you have?
I believe it is. I believe it is to a great extent. I mean, you look at Spags and KC, you look what's going on in Detroit with Aaron Glenn, you look at Washington with Dan Quinn and his staff, so to speak. So that's 3 of the 6, but that goes both ways. I think there's a real feel, it really, the play doesn't matter. It's the execution of the play. So offensively, it's always going to be who the quarterback is. And we can just see by the list of names that are playing quarterback, they're all difference makers, both with their arms and the ability to extend plays with their legs. But it is a feel thing. But you do prepare with a list of plays in every section. And I'm sure conversely, I've never been in a defensive room on a day-to-day basis, but I'm sure it's the same thing. But it's giving them things they don't expect. It's giving them things they haven't seen. And, Vic Fangio, for gosh sakes, I mean, he's been doing it for a lifetime. And if anybody has a great feel, he does. We didn't face them, but you face a guy like Spagnuolo in Kansas City, forget about it. I mean, he'll all out blitz you, and the next thing you know, he'll rush 3, and the next thing you know, he'll bring corner blitz. So you just have to be prepared for it all and have answers on your plays, because if you try to figure it out, you're gonna stress yourself out and you're gonna stress your team out.
Coach, help me out on this one because I'm still stuck in the past here. I'm, oh man, get off your lawn kind of guy, because I think you have to win a Super Bowl from the pocket. I don't think you can not win from the pocket. You have to have the ability to read defenses, especially with the complex defenses that you're talking about. But you're seeing more of these guys, and I'm not asking you, obviously, because you're associated with the Chargers, to comment on any other quarterback in there. But I would say this, you see the quarterbacks like Lamar and Jalen Hurts and Philly, and you see these guys, Josh Allen too. Coach, I mean, to me, you have to be efficient in the passing game. You just can't be a guy who is efficient in the run game, or can you? Tell me about the dual threat guy versus the drop back guy, because you have a drop back guy with Justin Herbert. I know Justin well through Mario Cristobal, and I love the kid. I mean, I think he's got a big arm. But do you think, again, we're now seeing the evolution of the dual threat guy in this sport because of what they're doing in college?
Well, I think Justin is a dual threat. I mean, he has the ability to extend plays, and he did throughout our season. He was dealing with an ankle situation for the first 12 weeks, but we started getting going as an offense when he was able to extend plays. And he's got the speed and the athleticism to do that. That kind of goes unrealized. But here's the deal. I think you're right, Dan. I think that it starts in the pocket. You have to be able to win the game in the last 2 minutes. And the first way you have to do it is by throwing the football. That's where games are won. They're all, I mean, these divisional games, 80% of them, I would say that, what are there, 6 games this week?
Yep.
There's 6 games. I will say 4 to 5 games will be one-score games, and they'll be decided in the last 2 to 4 minutes of the game, whether teams are trying to score or teams are trying to hold the lead. That's the way this weekend will go. It'll be one score. But all these quarterbacks can throw from the pocket, whether it's Mahomes, Hurts, Stafford, Goff. Lamar has had a fantastic season. Jalen Daniels is a future. I mean, he is impeccable for as young as he is to play the way he's played. All these teams have great quarterback play, but they also, and as a coordinator, as a play caller, you got to have a quarterback who can extend 2 or 3 plays a game, particularly on third down. You just cannot make the right calls on third down with the volume of different types of defenses. So again, something to look for is not only throwing from the pocket. It's not that they're running quarterbacks. They're not wildcat. All these guys can throw from the pocket, but which quarterback can extend and find a first down, whether it's Stafford, whether it's Lamar or Goff. I mean, when you think, can Stafford do it? Can Goff do it? But I will bet, I will go on record that probably 1 or 2 times during the game, Goff will find a way to make 1 first down, and that's huge. That turns 35% on third down conversions to 42. And if you take care of the ball, which all these guys are 90 ratings and above, you're going to be in a 1-score game in the fourth quarter and have a chance to win.
How about this, Coach? Do you agree today that the game is played more in space than it was, say, 10 years ago now? That you see the game today that the linebackers 10, 15 years ago were the Levon Kirklands of the day. Now you're looking for more of those cover 2, Tampa 2 type guys like a Derek Brooks that could drop back in coverage and get these backs out of the backfield. Because you take a look at a tight end position today versus the Mark Bavaro days, that position has evolved into being an integral part on being able to move the football down the field. I mean, is the game played more in space today than it's ever?
I think you can argue that. I mean, it's the rules are set up to play the game in space. To give an advantage to the offensive players and the tight end position. And if you have 2 tight ends, one of which can both block and catch, that's the greatest advantage, because you can keep teams in base defenses and have three guys to throw the ball to, and 4 and 5 if you include the tight end in the back. So I would agree with that. I think the rule changes, and that's where the advantage goes to teams like Philly, that they can like the Ravens, who can line up and run the ball because of the rules. And this is another point of it is, how many times does a linebacker take on a lead blocker in the NFL, in OTAs and training camp? It just doesn't happen. So they got to practice it. I mean, taking on Picard is not an easy thing to do. For example, taking on some of our fullbacks is not an. Now all of a sudden you've got linebackers who don't get a chance to practice taking on the run, and now they see it on Sunday. That's hard, and that's an advantage, not only running the football, but then the creation of a play action game off of that.
From 30,000 feet, Coach, when you see a guy like Jalen Hurts and you see his abilities, Jimmy Johnson's been on and Tony loves him too. I mean, 2903 this year in passing. Am I jaded by the numbers because I'm looking for more numbers and only 18 touchdowns? Now, again, they had a 2,000-yard rushing and running back this year, and they were able to dominate. And plus, by the way, maybe I'm bitching more, Coach, at the method and not the result because they're 15 wins. They're 15-3 right now, heading into a divisional round. I mean, when you see Hurts, what do you see when you see that player?
So let me just say this. We did not see Hurts at all on tape during the whole season.
Okay.
I've seldom watched a game, but I know who Barkley is, and I know what he did. So when you win 15 games and you can run the ball in January, you got a hell of a football team, and you cannot critique the method. He still had 18 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. I had a chance to watch. I was at a Cleveland practice a couple years ago when Philly practiced against the Browns.
Yep.
And I was overly impressed with Jalen and his ability. I did not realize how good a passer that he was, number one. And what I'm what really intrigued me is I think he's a great leader. I mean, listening to speak to the press and his post-Super Bowl press conference, he won me over. This is a leader of men. This is a guy who can transcend the locker room. You know, credit to Nick Sirianni for the job. People do not realize how hard it is to win one game in the National Football League. It is really hard, and they won 15 games. And nobody can argue that by starting with running the football and with the offensive line that they have and the receivers that they have and the defense that they have, complementary football, man, if you're an outsider and you're not living in Philadelphia, you're going, you know, Howie Roseman, that's a hell of a job. Nick Sirianni, that's a hell of a job. That's winning football and protecting your team by doing the right thing. I don't think there's one thing you can complain about if you're looking at the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, I'm not there.
I got it.
I'm not in the stadium, and I get a chance to watch the games, and we never had a crossover where I watched the Eagles play offense. All I know is what I've heard and the statistical aspects of it.
When you see Josh Allen, Coach, I mean, boy, I saw him at Wyoming his junior year, and then I saw him his senior year, and I was like this, well, maybe it's the talent that's around him a little bit too, because, you know, it's Wyoming. You're not going to be the University of Miami and have volume of players rolling around here, but God, he just looks so special. I mean, that's him and Lamar, man. You could flip a coin. It's that conversation, is it, Coach? Well, if you want Lamar, I'll take Allen. And if you want Allen, I'll take Lamar. I mean, is it that close?
Oh, I think that, you know, Josh Allen will not argue that Lamar is a better athlete and a more explosive runner. But Lamar will be happy to tell you that Josh Allen can do it all. And I always said this Josh Allen was not a high percentage accurate thrower when he got out of college. He became one with the Bills. And that's, I think, I credited Brian Dable along the way and the staff that they had there at the time that helped elevate his ability systematically and athletically to become a much higher completion player and try to minimize, the negative plays that he's had along the way. I mean, he's like the great baseball player. He's going to strike out, but, every one of these quarterbacks are game wreckers. That's the fun of the playoffs. That usually happens. They're all game wreckers. And every defense starts with, how do we get to this guy? How do we hit him? How do we make him think? How do we get around his legs? How do we knock him down early to get his attention and not allow him to not have to take a shower after the first quarter? That's really the goal of all these defensive coaches.
Coach, a couple last questions here for you. As the head coach, you probably have enormous respect for what Andy Reid is doing. He's going after a three-peat now. I mean, we've never seen it in NFL history, a team win 3 in a row. We've seen some teams have opportunities at it. But Coach, how much do you think he evolved from all the things that happened in Philly when he got to those 5 NFC championship games? You know, they just came up short in the Super Bowl against the Patriots. Is it just as simple as saying this? Well, Mahomes is the difference in this whole thing here because, again, people always go, well, Belichick, you know, he had Brady. And I'm like, well, name me a coach in NFL history that wasn't tied with a great coach. I mean, what did Don Shula do without Greasy and the way they ran the ball back then? He even had Marino. I mean, what did Noel do without Terry Bradshaw? What did even Walsh do without having Joe Montana? I mean, is it tied together? I guess what I'm saying, the coach and the player that's going to elevate where you are with your football team, because he just looks different. Is it Mahomes or is it Reid in Kansas City?
Well, I think you really talked about 2 things. Number one is every coach is on his own journey, and they're transformed throughout their journey. If they're lucky enough to get on the hip of a great quarterback, there's a pretty good chance that they'll evolve into being a great coach. I mean, when I look at the history of football, we've both been around. I mean, Joe Gibbs did it with 3 different quarterbacks.
Insane.
Bud Grant went to the Super Bowl with 3 different quarterbacks. You can look around the game. Don Shula spent most of his career with Dan Marino and Earl Morrall. You know what I'm saying? So you could, if you wanted to really break it down, you could say, man, Joe Gibbs, that's a hell of a job. You know, Bud, Gary Quazzo, Joe Kapp, Fran Tarkington. You know what I'm saying? So if we go back, we'll see it. But, you know, Bill Walsh will tell you Steve Young, Joe Montana, and Landry will tell you, you know, this, and Staubach and Marino, and, you know, and then the guys who did it with, you know, Brad, you know, you got to give Gruden credit. He did it with Brad Johnson. He was just good enough. But again, like the Ravens in 2002, like the Bears, such super defense, it just overcame good quarterbacking, right? But most of the time it's the quarterback tied. And, you know, Andy Reid's just, you know, I've watched him since he was a tight end coach in Green Bay, you know, and, you know, he's evolved. And I'm sure that just like Bill Belichick would do, and Landry and Shula would do, if you sat in the bar having a beer, I think they would be really honest. If it wasn't for him, there's no way I would have this. I felt that in Canada with my they're both Hall of Fame quarterbacks. We won a lot of games. We had so much fun. It would not have been the case without the quarterbacks that I had. And then the quarterbacks that I've coached throughout my lifetime and journey in the NFL, when they played well, I was really good. And when they didn't play well, I was not a very good coach. It's hard to overcome inferior quarterback play and be considered a good coach, regardless of the kind of coach you are. That's just the perception of the National Football League and of football in general.
Justin Herbert, what's your take on him and his athletic ability and his ability as an NFL player?
You know, Justin is elite at everything he does. Work ethic, humility, leadership. Nobody I mean, since I watched I coached Warren Moon in the Pro Bowl, Steve Young. I mean, it just goes on and on. Nobody throws the ball any better then or now in the entire league than Justin Herbert, accurate as they come, and athletic enough to make plays with his legs when it's necessary. And, you know, he's finally in a system that I think, you know, as we grow, as Joe Ortiz and Jim continue to build our football team, we're just going to get better and better. I mean, we did some great things. Justin was hurt early in the year. It probably cost us some games. And we certainly, as a team, did not play well in all 3 phases. And I give credit to D'Amico and his staff. They were the better team last Saturday. They deserved to win. We were not our best, and you have to be at your best in the playoffs. We were 13-6, 2 minutes left in the third quarter, got away from us. It's a credit to the Texans. They deserve to be in the next round.
Why does Jim Harbaugh win? And you know what? I'll tell you this, Coach. If you want to hire a Harbaugh, you can't go wrong when it comes to coaching. These guys, They know what they're doing here, man. I mean, why has Jim won at every level that he has coached, whether it's University of San Diego, Stanford, Michigan, he was at San Francisco, and now what's the secret sauce with him?
Yeah. Well, let me start this way. When I was a coordinator in Oakland, Jim came in as a quarterback coach. Al Davis hired him, and you could see that he was special. If there's 8 billion people on the planet, there's only one Jim Harbaugh. It's almost difficult to describe. It's a combination of how much he loves football, how much faith he has in God, and the direction. He's Jack and Jackie Harbaugh's son, and he's John Harbaugh's brother. That's a pretty good mixture. And he's played the game, and he played in the National Football League for 15 years. So what comes out when you listen to Jim talk is his love of family, his love of the team. Everything he says is authentic. If he says, I love this team and I want them all back, he means that. He knows it can't happen because we got drafts and free agency, but he does believe that. And he's got a sense of timing that is indescribable. It's simple, it's storytelling, and it's just been an honor to have hung out. And, I'll just leave you with this, Dan, is that I watched the special on him and his brother on ESPN the other day, and his dad said, and his dad was a longtime coach, as we all know. His dad said, I only wish I would have worked for John and Jim in my first year of coaching. And about 4 months ago, I was just chatting with Jim off the field, and I said, you know what? I only wish that you were my first head coach, because that's the impact he's had on my life, and the reassurance. I think that I wasn't that way when I was young, but I've evolved to be that coach now, and that makes a hell of a final stop on this journey.
Absolutely. I think that Jim Harbaugh is a fish with a mouth on it. It just like that. That's what I see with him and how he reminds me.
Yeah. It's just you can't describe it, and there's nobody like him. And he's not. I worked for John too, in Baltimore, and they're both phenomenal coaches. But I think what separates Jim is not talent, his talent, or John's talent. They were great coaches, but Jim's experience as a player for 15 years in the National Football League kind of gives him a unique perspective coming in, that very few people have.
Coach, thank you so much, man. This has been awesome. I hate you do this every time to me. You go, I'm not gonna. You brought it to the table here, man. That was great stuff, and I'm so happy for you, Coach. Dude, you're a football man. I mean, people don't realize this guy should be he should be in a law firm in New York somewhere. He could have been in a law firm in New York, and he goes, I'm going to go into football instead. He's supposed to be a lawyer, but you ended up being a head coach and a great coach as well, and a dear friend of mine for over 40 years. Coach, I love the hell out of you. You know that, and thank you so much for doing this for me. You always find time.
Dan, I'm always here for you.
Thank you, Coach.
You matter, buddy.
Man, you got it right there, brother. Thank you, man. That is my friend, Marc Trestman. God, we've been friends for over 40 years, man. I appreciate him doing that, guys. Great stuff, man. I mean, yeah, hey, listen, Marc has worked with everybody on the planet there too, so really appreciate it. Guys, thank you guys very much. We appreciate it. This Week in Football is coming up with Pat. So he will have, I believe, Sal Palantonio will be with us there, and he will have the show going for you. So don't forget to. We appreciate Marc Trestman doing that. So we've had two former head football coaches with us. Yesterday was Jay Gruden, and today was Marc Trestman. I believe Tony Dungy is coming on tomorrow, so we're working on that as well. And by the way, I forgot to tell Marc, that's right, Tony Dungy said to say hi to him because he told me, he goes, no. Marc was a year behind me at the University of Minnesota. So, yeah, we appreciate everybody. Stay tuned for This Week in Football with Pat. We thank you guys very much. Have a good one. Big Z, thank you again. Big Joey, thank you. 2 to 6 tomorrow Eastern time, and we'll see you on the flip side.